take a look at Degenerates, the Hand of Doom. Looking just for a rules introduction. I think somebody else did an explanation of the rules. It's going to be better than mine. I used the intro to give an introduction to the rules enough that people understand where I'm coming from with the game. That's the main point of my introduction, honestly, but it tends to go into detail. I'll be working through the rules. However, I'm no expert at anything I play, probably. So, you're catching someone who's played this a couple of times, working through to try to explain them. And that's all, not someone who's polished up some kind of explanation. Let me give a little bit of my history on this. I guess this is semi-local in the sense that it's produced in Oregon. And yeah, that's where I am now. And the game store that I go to has a few copies of it for sale, along with expansions. And I got to play it a couple of times there, had a great deal of fun with it, and said, okay, I'm willing to plunk down the money for a new game, whatever. The base game is not an unreasonable amount of money. It's high, I think $80 or so, but the expansions are actually pretty expensive. And I did not buy everything, but I bought everything that added to the game. And basically there's 2 expansions that add cards and characters and stuff like that to the game, and 2 that add more missions to the game, which is also very important. There are a few others that are just flavor for the game. I'll touch on those at some point, but yeah, that's not them. I don't know, they're there. So these guys came with missions. There's ones like these that don't come with missions. So this handles the Badlands and the Wetlands, which are 2 of the 4 regions in the game. There's also these other 2 regions. Those guys are a little cheaper. Those guys are like $10 each. It's still a lot for what's just text and in a little booklet, but I fell kind of in love with the game on those first 2 plays. What I didn't realize was I wasn't doing a lot with the rules of the game. Every now and then I'd look something up, and it was kind of a pain in the butt. But a couple other players were handling most of the, hey, what's going on? Now, one of the big, and the rule book is kind of painful, and trying to discern what is going on is not the easiest. It's not a clearly written, easily accessible set of rules. There might also be some issues where something's not clear from the cards or whatever. It relies a lot on special abilities. That's pretty common in this style of game. The real problem is some of the base parts of the game are a little harder. One thing though is there's a decent amount of information sitting on the player aid cards. I tend not to look at those as much as I should. They probably help you a great deal more than otherwise. And beyond that, let's see, I don't know. So the first thought I had about this was, ooh, I like the idea of a fantasy, exploring kind of cool type game. What kind of turned me off on this, I have to say, is the graphics. They're a particular style, then maybe they're done very well in it. Some of the characters jump out kind of, not so much these, but I've seen some of them. Some of the imagery jumps out kind of in a 3D type sort of way, just the way the colors are used and everything. And I can see that appealing to people. It made it very difficult to read the board, and it makes it harder for me to handle. And the world's kind of funky in the way, say, Glorantha is funky. This put me very much in my mood for, hey, I want to be playing RuneQuest, to tell you the truth, and had me digging up, what is it? The Nomad Gods over here, my French version of that I haven't worked through the rules for. That probably would have been what I was playing if I'd gotten my act together on that. But instead, because my wife and I tried playing this, I decided I would break this outlot's still kind of familiar and try doing a campaign. All told, everything I bought was kind of expensive. It came to around $200 total, which to me is a lot for a game, but you know, I mean, Gloomhaven runs around what, I just bought that, and cool stuff, you can get it at like $130. I bought it for, well, it would have been more than that if I had paid the full shipping cost in an auction, the earlier edition. But the guy who sold it to me kind of took some pity on me and reduced the rate, because I don't always do the kind of research I want. And he also then later, when I entered into another one of his auctions, sent me First World War as kind of a bonus, which is very, very cool. Just kind of gratis, you know, paid shipping and everything. So I guess it didn't work out that badly. It's just, I was like, oh, I screwed up there. I should have just bought it new. But it recycles an older version of it, which is kind of cool. Anyway, my wife and I started playing it, and she fell in love with, you know, the characters and kind of the appearance. There's a cuteness factor to some of the stuff. Some of the cards are kind of silly cute. To me, that I'm not so attracted to silly cuteness, but it does give it a little bit better flavor than like generic fantasy, right? The flavor of the game also is kind of neat. You start off, you're not your standard heroes, but I guess it just didn't really suit her tastes in terms of what we're trying to do. Just wasn't all that, it's not that it wasn't clear, but it wasn't all that nicely linked to the reality of what's going on. So you're going to be shifting these numbers, and that's a lot of what you're trying to do. There's other things in the story that you try to do, but it just didn't feel like it was grounded enough in what was going on for her. And for me, the headache of the rolls and the pain of trying to play it, neither of us was really enjoying it that much. I'm going to see if it holds up a little better solo than it did otherwise. Now, I'm going to be playing it 4-player solo. You can play it single character solo. That's probably not the most wise thing to do to begin with, because although the game kind of scales the difficulty based on the number of characters you have, you almost certainly need more abilities than one character has. There might be a couple characters who can kind of stand in the middle and do a little bit of everything. But I wanted to showcase a few of the character capabilities, and I figured the best way of doing that is to play with 4 players. Now, with all the expansions that are currently out, there's a whole big deck of characters, and I chose not to play any of the ones that I've played before. This is the one my wife was playing. That's actually a fairly solid character across the board. It's able to generate a decent amount of luck and some other facets. There's also different ways you can play it. You can play them as standalone scenarios, or you can play a campaign game. And there are a number of starting points in the campaign. On the first, in the first box set, there's basically 1. I think each of the things that add scenarios, they add like 4 scenarios each. They each give you a new starting point and a new set of scenarios. So it might be possible that maybe I'll do more than, you know, maybe I'll do a pretty rich number of plays. We'll see what comes of it. The first time we played, although we staked one player out here at this tree to die, 3 out of the 4 of us managed to succeed in a goal in a very nice way. Got some nice bonuses. However, as the campaign goes on, the world starts getting tougher and more painful. And although you get more powerful the more scenarios get played, you're facing a really, really difficult burden, which is the Hand of Doom. That is this hand here, and it's also these tracks up here. And if those all fill up, the whole game is over and terrible things happen. If those don't fill up, well, it's hard to kind of assess what your victory is if you're playing a scenario on its own without the campaign, because it's fairly easy to complete at least the first scenario outside of a campaign. You just kind of have to avoid some problems like these nooses and the monsters that you'll meet on the way, and just get someplace and do a rest action, which is pretty cool. Some of the other scenarios, you may have to do something to be victorious, but you can judge your situation and say, were we victorious or not, you know? Okay. Let me explain some of the stuff that's kicking around. First of all, you have, we'll just hit things as we go. You have a set of encounter cards, one per region in the map, and sometimes you're going to be facing encounters, which are special things that happen, and they'll only happen if you've triggered a danger event, which happens every turn you draw one of those. Not every turn is one apply to you, and you can kind of avoid them. In addition, the danger events can draw you monsters, which you will usually have to fight before you actually have the encounter, but sometimes the encounter comes first. Each character has their own card. They have a set of starting stats for their character. These stats, as well as some more mutable ones. These guys can change too, though. And you have these classes, which are going to affect what you can use. So for, let's take a look at for something. For example, this guy, in order to use this, and this is a skill, you have to be a merchant or a rogue. And you also have starting items and skills that come with it. Feels kind of like Talisman in terms of this kind of stuff, except for the skills, which are a little funkier, and they'll work in with the combat system, as do the weapons and everything. The combat system's a little bit more detailed and interesting than, say, Talisman's, hey, roll a die and add your strength. Okay. And when you include all the weaponry and everything, it becomes kind of an intricate and neat little system. You also have places where you can put different statuses, and they're separated into when they'll go away automatically. Each character has one of these standees, but if a party's all traveling together, they only have one standee on the board. If the party splits up, if the players split up into multiple parties, they have different standees. More decks. The danger deck, this is going to generate a lot of the action in the game in terms of you draw one of those at the end of each turn. It doesn't matter how many parties there are. Each party is going to draw one of those, but only one of them is affected in terms of those cards are going to generate problems on the board. They kind of generate an event thing. Weaknesses, I haven't done these yet. We played with them. I haven't set them up yet. At the beginning of the game, for each character that you pick, well, for each of the player's characters, they can draw a weakness. If they want it, if it's allowable, they have the option to buy it, to take it. And it'll give them some additional XPs. Triumphs and Dooms, those come later in the game. These are additional skills. You'll be able to buy these with your experience points when you're resting. Loot, it's just treasure for the most part, but there's other stuff in it. There might be allies in there. There are also, I think there's a few events in there, and there are monsters in there. So while you're looting, you might find like a goblin in some dead creature's sack. Epic loot, better loot. I don't think there's anything too nasty in there. Epic monsters, nastier monsters. Every now and then you'll have to draw these. Law cards. When you're facing these nooses, you might be facing a situation where the law is pursuing you and has some questions for you, and then you have to deal with them. Possibly by fighting Sign of Power, I don't fucking remember. Like the Dooms and Triumphs, it's in the rules somewhere, and we'll get to that. Okay, what about the board itself? The board's kind of complicated. Yeah, it looks it. Okay. So one of the big things is there's a differentiation between roads, which have kind of a purplish border to them. This does too. And trails, I think they're called, which are brown things that have border the color of the area they're in. On top of that, you have specific regions. So you have these four major, and I don't know what the fucking terms are. You got words that mean the same thing. So, yeah. So you have four major regions in the game, which are pretty easy to discern. Within that, you have territories. So, for example, this area here is one territory with these bluish, purplish lines in them. This area here is another territory, and then up here in the blasted heath is a final territory. Within territories, regions, etc., you have specific locations. So, for example, the windmill sits here. It is in the foothills and uses the foothills danger zone. Witch Hill here is in the Witchwood, but Witch Hill has its own number, so it has its own specific danger value associated with it that's different from the Witchwood as a whole. And you'll get kind of used to being able to read those as you go, but sometimes it's pretty damn hard. In addition, movement from areas is based well, so you have locations, for example, Witch Hill, and then you have roads that are adjacent to those locations. These also, but not this one, because this is adjacent to the East Bridge. And you're going to be moving from locations to roads or paths, and then to other locations, etc., as you travel. There are, okay, yeah, this number up here is the bounty level. That's going to be how easy it is, how much law there is out there hunting you at that particular time. Green numbers are the town levels. That's how established the town is. Towns themselves are generally pretty safe places. You don't have, danger isn't going to find you in a town kind of in the same way that it finds you in the wilderness. But towns can get degraded to become orange areas, and that's your danger level in an area, and that's kind of problematic. Some areas have a noose on them just printed, or other icons. Those icons are all at least cataloged over here. There's a little bit of summary to some of them. Some of them can't happen except, I think, through counters being placed on the board. Well, similar to these nooses here. There's not normally a noose here, but at the beginning of the scenario I'm playing, there's a bigger law influence in the game. So those are going to be there. These have different effects, and we have to kind of pay attention to them. So, for example, a little flag there. We can look that up. That's not a base. It is a settlement, which is allowed to have a town action if the town value. If it has a town value, i.e. a green number on it, then you're able to take town actions in there that you won't be able to take them if it degenerates badly enough. Okay. So, like I said, I haven't picked weaknesses yet. You can draw one. They'll give you some bonus if you take it. Often they're pretty bad, so you don't want to do that. If you do take one, you're allowed to try to take a second one. If you draw ones that aren't applicable to your character, you keep drawing until you get one that is, in order to take the option for it. Then you choose a mission and play it. I'm going to start the campaign with the base core mission. Okay. Attributes and tests. Often you'll be asked to make a test against a specific attribute. The way that's generally done is you roll 2 dice. Try not to throw them on the floor where your injured hip and back will have trouble. And you're trying to roll equal to or less than a given number. That's a pretty good roll. If the test succeeds, the highest die in that test, it generally is your effect from the test. So, you know, like with a magic of 6, this is a pretty good roll because I got an effect of 3 off of it. If I was rolling against my morale of 9, I would much rather be seeing something like this, where I get an effect of 6 for my success effect. It may or may not matter whether or not you do anything other than pass. Sometimes it does matter, sometimes it doesn't. On top of that, you have luck. A little shamrock. Whenever you want, if you failed a die roll or didn't get the dice you wanted, let's say I rolled this 7 and I'm trying to roll a magic and it's really important. Well, I can spend a luck to re-roll one of the dice in any situation. And given that there's no player versus player interaction in the game, for the most part, it feels like there should be. I gotta tell you. And that's part of what kind of intrigued me. Like the first time I played, like I said, we left a guy staked out down here to die. But that wasn't really an anti-player. It wasn't really a player versus player action. Rather, it was we were trying to do our best to win the scenario. And made a cooperative decision, including that player, but he couldn't do anything about it because he was badly injured. That leaving him behind was our best chance for success because we were all in trouble, but he was in much worse trouble. Okay. You have money, you have experience points, which you spend on getting skills. They can get lost, but through other means, though. Money you can buy objects with. You can also pay for certain services. So, for example, you can travel down the river, only downstream down the river to the port. You can also, and that'll cost you gold. There are also other times you might want to bribe someone or something like that. Hit points and wounds, pretty standard for a role-playing-ish type thing. These are your wounds. As you take them, they go up. These are your hit points. They generally stay where they are, but if you're like poisoned, you lose some. If your stat changes for the worse, you lose some. And it's just easy to track them that way. Some, not many, characters have armor. So for example, this guy, if he's wearing this, he loses 1 off his agility but gains 2 armor. That's a pretty good bonus. All of these items probably have a requirement though. So this has a requirement of strength 7. So he can carry it. He can't wear it. He could carry it, but he can't wear it. They also have money that you can get for selling them or that you have to pay to buy them. This has a limitation. It's a body item. You can only wear 1 body item at a time. And it says it's a heavy item. That's what the anvil means. You can only carry 2 heavy items, so he's loaded up and cannot even carry a 3rd heavy item with him, just with his starting stuff. What armor is going to do is it's going to reduce the effects of every attack on you. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of like armor in RuneQuest. You get status conditions. Like I said, they show up down here. We got a sample of some of them. Let's get a look at some of them. Here we go. So like fatigued, and it has the instructions on it. The instructions are, the effect is also in the book, but sometimes it's harder to find there. It's kind of neat that the counters have it nicely written on them. It kind of sucks that it's sometimes hard to see what things do. Some of them are pair-offs, like if you're blessed or demoralized, that's going to affect your morale. If you're blessed, it's a +1 morale. If you're demoralized, it's a -1 morale. And they're on flip sides of counters. If you get one while you have the other, it just cancels out. Monsters are going to have their own classes, which indicates whether or not they're affected by certain abilities, etc. Skills, whatever. We got some of those here. Skills have two sides to them. So they cost you a certain amount of experience to have them if you have the proper prerequisite. And once you have the skill and paid the experience to get it, when you're allowed to do so, you can then pay again that same experience point and get the higher level of that skill, which can, it's master level. It can be a little better. It's not as impressive as like the special ability of master level in Tales of the Arabian Nights, unfortunately. Okay, let me move this over here, put it on top of some stuff. The regular game turns are split into 3 phases. Map action phase, where you're going to choose something called your map stance. which I need a bunch of counters that I put back in place. But basically, one character in each group is the party leader. In this case, it's this guy because he has the highest morale. And he will choose whether the party as a whole is going bold or cautious. Now, other people can give advice for that, but it's his choice. We're also going to need these counters. The game only holds 4 players. There are a number of reasons for that. It's not just the number of counters. You can't kind of fudge a 5th player in or something, because all the cards are based on the a 1 to 4 player game. Okay, so he gets to choose the stance. That's going to affect what you can do and how the world kind of treats you as you're going. And then you're allowed to either move or conduct a number of rest actions. After that, you're going to draw a card from the danger deck for each of your groups, and it's going to have 2 things. The first effect that it's going to have is going to be a general world effect. That only happens to the first group that draws a danger card. Then it has a, hey, what bad things happened to me in this space? And finally, you have an encounter phase in which you deal with both the encounters and the monsters that you face, if you've found anything. And those basically go together. You can't get one without the other. It might be possible that, like, you don't encounter the monsters because of the encounter or something like that. There's one that I know does that. On the map, you have the option to foot travel, where you can go to an adjacent space. Now remember, the roads are spaces and the locations are spaces. So like from Witch Hill, which I'm just using as a special example, the adjacent spaces, there are no spaces here that are adjacent to it. I can't go to the Witchwood, but I can go to one of these 4 roads that are adjacent to it. Adjacent to the road, well, adjacent to this road is Witch Hill, this road, these roads, and the East Bridge. Just to give you kind of an idea of how I think the map works. Okay. There are some special cases which we'll get into in a minute. You could force march. This allows you to move 2 spaces. You have to be in bold stance, and you can do this over roads or over paths, trails or whatever, if they have the little explored symbol on them, which is this eye. And that means at some earlier time in the game, you have rested on that road or that path and figured out all of its ins and outs, and now you can travel on it more quickly. You can explore any space in the game. I'm not sure the value of exploring some spaces. Paths, it's worth exploring in order to get that extra movement. And settlements, it's worth exploring and get some advantages from that as well. You can do lakeport travel. This also requires you to be in bold stance, and you're able to freely move from one of these lake ports to another. You can do river port travel. There are river ports, and you have to be bold, and you can spend 2 gold pieces per adventurer in order to move to the next port downriver from you. Oh, here's a nasty place to be. You don't want to be there. That's this little symbol indicates perilous, and it means you can't recover while you're in there, and that's just bad. You can void travel if you're doing bold movement. You can go from a void gate, which there are none on the board to begin with, to the maze, which is also not on the board. It's one of these little special things that will pop out if it becomes, these are void gates, and they can show up. You generally don't want them to show up, although there are characters who have desires to go there, I guess. I don't know. I can't figure that out. Finally, the last option you can make is rest. If you're outside, you make a camp, or you can stay inside a town, and then you're allowed to do as many rest actions as you like. Here's where you end up with if you follow the different river port travel. A lot of explanations of stuff. Void travel. Talk too much about that until it happens. Okay, if you're in a space with a danger level, each player can take turns using a camp action. If you're in a town, each player can take town actions. Camp and town actions are collectively known as rest. When you rest, the first action you must do is a recover. The reason you must do that is if you have any statuses, stati, even if they're good, they get discarded at this point. So like you could be high on drugs or something, which might be good, it might be bad. Or you could be blessed or something like that, and you may not really want to rest because of that. But that's the first thing you have to do. In addition, you roll 2 dice and make a morale check. If you succeed in the morale check, you get your morale number of wounds cured. If you fail in the morale check, you get half your morale level of wounds cured. And I believe everything rounds up. An explore action. You have to be doing bold. You make a perception test, and if you succeed, you get the little eye. Improve. Anytime you're resting, you can do an improve. You don't have to do any. You don't have to be anywhere special to do this, and that allows you to spend XP in order to improve a single skill. So, like, let's say I didn't have this looter skill. Well, let's flip that back over. He doesn't have it in mastery. If I didn't have it, I could spend 8 to get it. If I already had it, I could spend 8 more to get it up to the master level, which has more abilities to it. There's some of those are pretty good. Most of them are kind of fairly mild effects. You might find items are more effective, but it's not like the loot deck is filled with good stuff either. It's got decent stuff, but most of it's not going to be killer. Actually, the witch hunter or the witch smeller, who was my first character, has some really good items. He has a really good gun. I left behind a couple of the better characters because I played them already and I'm pretty sure how good they are. These guys turned out not to be as good as I had hoped. I thought their weapons would be good. Nah, they're not as good as the ones that I've seen. Okay. You can invest in a town. You have to have bold, and it has to be an actual settlement, i.e. have a green number on it. And if you do so, if you spend 20 bucks, you can increase the town level by 1 level. This will reduce the bounty level if you invest in a lowland segment, and that's a good thing. Some things make you want a high town level for some of the missions, and it also is getting them further and further away from the orange. Finally, you can trade. This requires that you be in, I don't know what that symbol is. I believe that is a green town. So this you don't actually have to have a green number to do. You can do this even if the settlement is orange, and you can try to get it towards green. This, it has to be a green settlement, and then you're allowed to buy and sell items. You draw cards from the loot deck equal to the town level in your space. There are modifiers to that, though. You can get additional ones, and I don't remember what this all is. I thought there was a bonus to investment for that. There might be. Let's see. If you explored, you get a bonus card. That's the extra thing. Okay, I'm going to swap batteries and explain the danger phase. In the danger phase, you draw one of these cards. Tiny little card. A lot of information on it. First thing it tells you is a location where the danger value increases. If it's a green number, it goes down, unless it's a 1, in which case it flips to an orange one. If it's an orange number, it goes up by 1. If it goes to a 6, if it was already a 6 and it goes up, you got a problem and you're going to start causing Hand of Doom events. This just indicates if the Hand of Doom is going somewhere, that's the particular location within the region, or whatever the word is, that it shows up in, and that'll cause its own issues. Okay, then you look at the next line. Now, this will have numbers on it, but it may also have qualifiers. So this is the symbol for outdoors, and this is the symbol for indoors. Obviously, they're mutually exclusive. If you're outdoors, you're going to have a danger value of 6. If you're indoors, you have a danger value of 5. The higher that number is, the safer you are. The less likely to find anything, at least. That may or may not be good, but you compare that to the danger value of where you are. And that's kind of a complicated thing. So if you're at Witch Hill, this is your danger value. If you're anywhere else in the Witchwood, this is your danger value. In that case, a 6 outside, say if you were on the road here, would indicate that you exceeded the danger level, so you're fine. If you got equal to or less than that, you would have had some kind of encounter. Now, you have some capability to modify this. You can modify this number up 1, essentially, if you are cautious and you all succeed in a stealth check, which is basically rolling against your perception. Everybody in the party has to succeed. Hunting is... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, every member has to succeed in stealth. Hunting is the opposite. You can reduce this danger number, essentially, if you're in bold movement, by rolling a hunt check. And more people have to succeed than fail, I believe is what it is. Yep. And then you make it more likely to find what you're looking for. What you find is listed down here. This is if there's an encounter. And then you'll be drawing an encounter card, looking to see if it says play immediately. If it does not, you put it face down and you don't pay any more attention to it until after any critters you face. Then this shows how many critters you're going to face. And so like if you were playing with just 1 player, you would face 2 critters. If you're playing with 4, well, this indicates all kind of nastiness. I believe that's 2 epic monsters, but I'm not sure. Yes, epic monster is this. Great. And that's one danger to playing with 4, is you're more likely to attract potent stuff. I've played in 2, 3, and 4 players so far, never in 1. And I don't know where it was toughest, to tell you the truth. Because it is scaled, but I'll tell you this much. When you're fighting epic monsters, you can get epic loot. And you can also get more victory points per character. So it might be to your advantage to be playing with lots of characters and generate more of those epic monsters. Then again, it might not. If you get one of these things that has a little noose on it, and you're on a law space, then you compare the law level on the card to the bounty level that's out there. And that might generate a law monster instead of a normal monster for that. However, if you're not on a noose space, you treat it as though it's a regular, and you ignore that noose and just treat the number as what it is. If you're in a green space, you don't have to worry about danger that's not law. And this will still tell you how many you're facing. Okay. You draw according to the type of terrain that you're in. Epic monsters are limited by what terrain or possibly law type that they might be. With the encounter, essentially you just read it and do what it says. If it says play immediate or resolve immediately, you deal with it before you draw any monsters. If it doesn't, you put it face down and deal with it after you deal with monsters. Okay, if you defeat the monsters, then you get to encounter and see what happens. If you're in a situation where you complete the mission, you get the bonuses for that. You'll move on to the next mission. That might clear some things. So for example, these counters that were placed for this mission, those all go away and new counters come on. But there's other stuff that'll happen during the game. For example, the changes in numbers, there might be epic monsters sitting around, whatever, that are going to remain. You only remove the stuff that was for the setup of that mission. You'll see why these are set where they are for this mission. After you handle whatever the encounter says and the after effects of combat, then you go on to the next turn. Okay, but we haven't talked too much about combat. Well, monsters have a number of values on them. We haven't drawn any, but I'll just show you this one. It's got a name, it's got classes that it has, which again, those are going to be affected by some of your special abilities perhaps, or their own special abilities. It's got a number of experience points and a number of gold that you get for killing it, taking it as a trophy. It's got a choice of who it's going to target. It's got an attack value, which is how much damage it's going to do to you if you don't block it. It's got an armor value possibly, and a number of hit points that it'll take to kill. They also have abilities written here. If the ability is written up on this black area here, it's an arrival ability, and it takes effect as soon as the monster shows up. Some of the arrival abilities don't come into play if the monster shows up in the midst of a battle. Most of them do, however. All of them come into play if they're just drawn through the danger card. The other is special effects that the monster has depending on things. So for example, Horde Vermin, what that actually does, I can remember it, is if there are any other vermin in that space attacking any of the characters, this guy gets +1 to his attack value. There's a whole series of these. We'll worry about them as they come up. Epic monsters, like I said, they have a color marker for them, and they have this metaphysical restriction, plus or minus on them. Oh, some of the epic monsters may move. We'll worry about that if that comes up in a scenario. Okay, the actual fight. The first thing you do is you establish the targets that the monsters are going to face. Like I said, this has a little note here, so this will attack whoever currently has the highest agility. I think, as far as I can tell, the players have the option, if there's a tie, on who takes which monster at any given time. Then you deal with any arrival abilities if the monster just entered the fight. And then each character in perception order gets to take an action. And again, I believe the players have the ability, so like 3 of these characters have a perception of 8. I believe they can rearrange them how they like. This guy has a perception of 6 though. He will always be going last unless some other effect comes into play. What they do on their player turn, and that's important because you can snipe monsters off other people's stuff, which might be very helpful. You choose a combat stance, which is either going to be an assault or a guard, not to be confused with bold and cautious. Then you declare what your combat action is. It's usually going to be attacking, so like this guy will probably want to use his polearm to attack, and then he uses his strength. The reach is a type of attack that may be an effect on in certain cases, but basically the fact that he's using his strength, he'll be making a test against his strength and see how much damage he does. So you declare what your action is. In addition to your action, you're given a quick action, which is sort of a freebie that you're allowed to do. They're fairly limited things, like you can switch a piece of equipment or something like that, or loan something to someone else. Okay, then you actually resolve the action, which is usually going to be rolling a bunch of dice. Most often, you're going to be rolling 2 green, 2 red, and a purple if you have anything assigned on you. The red dice are your attack dice. They generally are associated with the combat action you're taking. There may be differences with some combat actions, but attack actions are always this. No, not quite. But the green dice is your defense dice. The purple die is your power die. Sometimes you'll get 2 of them. Sometimes you won't get any. You roll them all together. The attack dice are going to probably be a test. So here I'm making a test against strength. Do these. Okay, well I got under my 9 strength. I got a 6. That means I will be doing 6 points of damage with that in general. The defense dice, I'll usually be using agility for defense. In this case, I also rolled a 7. That's less than my agility, or less than or equal to my agility, so I get to successfully avoid damage. In this case, I can avoid 6 points of damage. The purple die will also be rolled, and it's not going to help much here. If I'm assaulting, the purple die can be used to replace the highest red die for the amount of damage you do. If you're guarding, the purple die can be used to replace the highest green die for the amount of damage you avoid per monster. So this is per thing that's on you. So getting a 6 on that is a pretty big deal if you can succeed when you roll it. All right, we have a few special things though. I seem to remember something that I didn't go over that I think I forgot last time I played. Okay. One of the things is, so some actions, some skills, some weapons require that you be in either assault or guard in order to even do them. So you have to choose that in order to do it. Unarmed strikes, if you don't have a weapon, you can still attack, but you're just trying to punch them or something, and your damage is going to be your lowest attack die. I don't know what happens if you throw the power die in with there. Your power dice are halved. Okay, and they can replace they can replace your green dice in that case. You're allowed to escape. You make an agility test. You flee the fight if you succeed. If you're not being targeted, or if all monsters targeting you are dazed or have an attack of 0 or less, you can escape without having to test. If you're being targeted with something with pursue, you're not allowed to escape unless it's dazed or hexed. If you escape, you remove from the fight at the end of your turn after you take any damage. This is your attack action to escape. And you can't take actions or be targeted for the remainder of the fight, although you're allowed to return to the fight at the start of any subsequent turn. And what's cool about this is if you have things that trigger at the start of the fight, they come back into play for you. So you can, like, if you're a thief or something who has like backstabbing ability, you can run away from the fight and come back and stab someone in the back again. Okay. There was something special about defense dice here that I seem to recall. Okay. If you're in guard stance, yeah, you still have to succeed there. If your defense roll fails, you take full damage from the monsters this round. However, if you're in guard stance, you can use each of your power dice to prevent the damage from one monster. So even if you fail your roll, being in guard stance gives you some defensive value, which is kind of cool, and I forgot about that. Many times that I've played, and we've done it a little bit, but not much. Okay, if you end up taking enough hits to equal your total hit points, you've been defeated, and you can no longer do anything for that combat, and you're in some danger at that point. We've already talked about the wounds that you do to monsters. They're going to be marked with little blood markers that we have over here. There's 3s on the other side. Once they get their total hit points, they're dead. Whoever inflicts the killing wound on the monster gets the monster turned sideways as a potential trophy. If they survive the fight and the party wins and doesn't run away or anything, you will be getting experience and money and looting opportunities off of them. At the end of each round, you check to see if any of your abilities go away, or if if you take any special bonuses there. Now, if you're victorious, the danger level goes down once in the space. Now, you can only reduce it once per turn in a space, but there's one special case there. So it's possible that you might fight a battle and then the encounter causes another battle, or a loot check causes another battle. You don't get additional reduction off that. If you reduce a danger level 1 area and it's a settlement, it becomes a town at that point. That's actually kind of interesting. Like, this is a settlement that's terrible to be in, the Goblin Fortress. But if you can bring enough law and order to the place, if that's what it actually is, if you can bring enough happiness to the place, it won't be serving chaos anymore. Okay. If you only fight monsters from the law deck or the loot deck, it's not going to reduce the danger in the space. I didn't know that. I screwed that up too. And I probably will screw things up as I'm playing. If the monsters were victorious, well, anybody who's defeated and is left in the space is killed. If you're killed, you lose your skills and items. If there's no one left on the board, the game is lost. Otherwise, the danger level in that space goes up by 1. If anyone escaped, they lose their trophies. The monsters get shuffled back into the deck. If an epic monster remains, you set aside its card and it has its own counter. Each of the epic monsters have their own counters and become long-lasting problems. Now, if you win against an epic monster, you reduce the danger level to the space to 1. What it doesn't say is what to do if it's already 1. I would say you swap it to the green 1. If you're defeated by law, the danger level doesn't go up, but in the campaign, you can be captured and be forced into an escape type scenario because of that. If no one wins, the danger level goes down by 1. An epic monster dying still reduces it all the way to 1. Oh, yep, it goes to green if necessary. That is specified. But if you didn't win the fight as a group, if you ran away or something but still beat up some stuff, whatever, you discard your trophies, you don't get an advantage after them. If you are defeated and you're at 0 health, and it never goes further than that, it bottoms out at 0 at your health level, you have to rest and recover a point at least on the next turn, or else you will die. That can be a problem because if you're in a perilous space, you're not allowed to recover health there normally through regular rest actions. You might be able to do it through magic or through potions or stuff like that. If you win a fight, you get your experience points in gold, but not if you escape, in which case you have to discard everything unless you return. Yeah, lots of exceptions here. But if you collected XP, however much XP you got from creatures you killed, you roll a die. If you roll equal to or less than the XP that you gained, you get a draw from the loot deck. That could be an additional monster that you have to fight. Epic monsters give their XP to everyone, but not for looting. And anyone who killed an epic monster, if they get a loot, they get to draw out of the epic loot pile, which is, of course, more epic. Okay, more stuff. The Doom track. And I'm not going to go into the special stuff here, but there's, you know, some background and a lot in the other things. Just at the top of the board, there's the Doom track. Whenever you draw a danger card during the danger phase that would raise it above 6, instead the Doom track gets raised. And what you put is a marker of the color of the region that you're in. It can also be advanced by something that says advance the Doom track. It is not it is not advanced for other reasons. So like if you lose a battle at a 6 or something like that, that's not going to happen to advance the Doom track. If you're playing in the campaign game, though, and you don't want the Doom track advancing, if the players collectively spend enough luck equal to the number of players present, they can prevent the Doom track from advancing. And that's a big deal, because in the scenarios, you're probably not going to run out the Doom track. In the campaign, if you just let it run, if you don't try to prevent it, it is going to run on you and start causing problems. So you place a counter on the Doom track, you move the Hand of Doom at that point, and you draw and resolve a card from the Doom deck. When you advance the Doom track, you put the counter matching the color of the triggered space on the track. First time you put a Doom counter of a specific color, you shuffle the monster deck in the region's monster deck in with its discard pile, i.e. the nasty monsters that you faced that caused you that much problem, they're going back in, and the world's gotten uglier. The first time a blue Doom counter is placed, you shuffle the Law deck and its discards as well. When the Doom track is advanced, if there's already 5 counters on the track, the game ends. All right, when you advance the Doom track, the Hand of Doom shows up on the triggering space. This is the space indicated on the danger card. If the danger card corresponds to a territory, the specific location is listed below that territory. While the Hand of Doom is in that space, it's perilous, you can't recover. After resolving your danger card, if the Hand of Doom is in your space, you draw a Sign of Power card and resolve its effects. I don't know if those are good or bad, I've never drawn one. Ignore any random encounter result on your danger card. Instead, you may attempt to drive off the hand. During the encounter phase, after defeating any monsters, random encounter is the encounter deck. You still face monsters. After defeating any monsters, you may use the dispel action described on this page. If you cannot dispel, you're not allowed to dispel if you're defeated or if you lost a fight. In order to dispel, each character, and you have to be going bold for this to happen, can make a magic test. And this is one reason why I made sure to have at least one high magic character there. I.e., when I say test, you roll 2 dice. If you got less than or equal to your magic, you succeed, and this succeeded with a 4. So I'd get 4 wound counters on the Hand of Doom, or this also works with void gates. If at any point it ends up with 6 or more wounds on it, you remove it and all the wounds from the board. But whenever you roll this, you take piercing damage equal to your lowest die score. Piercing damage means it's not defended by armor or any other effect. That's just hits that go directly on you. If the hand moves to a different space or is removed from the board, all the wounds go away from it. If you drive the hand away, you remove a Doom counter from the track matching the current region's color. If you remove a void gate, you reduce the danger level in your space. All right, the Doom cards. After moving the Hand of Doom, you draw and resolve a Doom card. When you draw a Doom card, you check the hand's current space matches one of the spaces listed on the card. If it doesn't, you set the card aside and keep drawing until you draw a valid card. Next, you resolve the effects of the card. If the card has a pink remains in play section, you place it on the board and it'll be a persistent Doom effect, which applies for the rest of the campaign or game. After you resolve a Doom card, you shuffle the Doom deck together with any Doom cards set aside while looking for it. And this guy's got it's the worst strike, so there's got to be a lot of sausage there. Okay. The void gates. These can show up due to Doom cards, encounters, other effects. If one is placed on a space, the party has some choice as to that. If a void gate would be placed in a region that already has 2 void gates on it, you don't place a third, but you increase the danger level in each space with a void gate in that region. If it would be placed in a space that already has a void gate in it, you don't place a second one there, you increase the danger level in that space. If If you're in a space with a void gate at the start of the map action phase, you can use your map action in order to avoid travel to the maze, which is one of those little tokens, not actually on the board. While you're in a space with a void gate, you ignore any random encounters on your danger card, the icon. You don't draw a random encounter. Instead, you can attempt to close the void gate using the dispel action. The maze, if you're in bold stance, you can attempt to go back to the borderlands and go to a void gate. You might create a new void gate by doing this. You cannot place an explored counter on the maze, but you can explore if you want. There might be some reason you want to do that. And if you're in the maze during the danger phase, you ignore the icon key. You don't draw encounters or monsters. Instead, you get Void Shock, which is going to be piercing damage equal to the damage value on the danger card. All right. Loot cards, there's a number of different things. Allies, they'll come along with you and help probably. Diseases, they're going to cause you problems. Monsters, you'll have to fight them. Services, generally something you can purchase and you'll resolve its effect. And most of them, or many of them, are items, which you see over here. You have limits to what you can equip, and they follow rational rules. Heavy items you can only carry 2 of. Some items have ammunition. If something uses shot or uses ammo or uses arrows, you don't need an ammo card for it. However, you can load ammo of the right type, and then the weapon gains the special ability. I thought the dart gun can't really be used except to shoot darts. There's a couple of things that shoot darts, and darts are, I think, special, but I don't see anything here directly. An ammo card cannot be used without a unit that uses that ammo. You can't, like, chuck shot at people. You can exchange items. That's a free action. Rest actions provided by an item can only be used once per turn. It's a quick action. I'm sorry, I used the wrong term here. But it can't be used by more than one person in an action phase. For the campaign, there's a mission book over here that starts you out and gives you some goals and some benefits to succeeding. And that's about it. You set up that particular scenario. Scenario-specific setup goes away between scenarios. So in this case, that's these, the clue markers, and I believe this destroyed marker, and the bounty level. Those all are dictated by that scenario. And then other things might stick around, though, for the course of the game. If you have to clean up, there's some sheets I have over here, printout of, that you can use to record everything, and you record all the cards and everything for the characters. If you're not trying to play this with different groups, if you're just playing it with, you know, one group until you finish the campaign and then move on and maybe play with a different group, you can bag up the stuff that players have just to make it a little easier to set up. Otherwise, it's kind of dumb. Yeah. You can join a game in progress. Basically, you start a character. If you can't get all the stuff, if it's already like in someone else's hands, then you're screwed with that character and you don't get that stuff. There's some suggestions on skills and weaknesses that you might want to take that just help you there. There's additional expansion stuff, minis. And you can kind of change the game a little bit to make it a little easier, draw some danger cards to reduce the dangers in some of the spaces, choose to take a bonus at the beginning of the game. They give you some suggestions on how to play. It's pretty easy to get fucked up in this game. I know, at least in the campaign, I know that we played it, you know, the first scenario, that went pretty easily, but the second scenario became very, very hard for us to do anything, really. And the same kind of, with my wife and I, the first scenario didn't go all that well, but mainly we got beat up by a big monster and lost what we were supposed to be doing and ended up in kind of the not bonus ending for that scenario, which means that, you know, we didn't have as many advantages going into the second scenario, and that was starting to look kind of hard too. Although I took a character specifically to kill the epic monster that had screwed us up on the first one. He killed my first character, and that worked pretty well, but then it was kind of beginning to look like, well, okay, we'll probably be able to succeed in this scenario, but we're really not as powerful as if you really kind of succeed in a scenario. Anyway, I'll load this up and get started playing. I can't make you any promises. A, whether I'll survive for very long, and B, how long I want to actually play it. I did want to do the 4 players. I figure if characters start dying, I can either replace them if I'm happy with the 4 characters, or I can just, you know, let the party get smaller, because the game self-adjusts. It's how many characters are in a given party that determine how much risk, how bad the danger cards are. Which means that splitting up isn't necessarily a bad plan in this game. You'll attract more danger if you're traveling as a big party. All right, let's end this up.